Greetings. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, and anyone interested in surviving as a Pilates instructor. So number one on my list, I have, I think, four things today. And it's Monday, so it seems like it's been a long time. And I've been away a little bit, exploring some future options. And number one would be the presentation review that I took in hand and tried to be the presenter using the course that I put on Udemy, UDEMY.com, How to Survive as a Pilates Instructor. And I had the phone book for Glenwood Springs, and I called up everybody in the Pilates section, which was like 10 numbers, and 5 numbers in exercise that seemed to include Pilates. And the great thing was, as a learning thing was, no one answers the phone anymore. I think I had one person actually answer the phone out of 15. And so I got to leave a pre-written, hopefully thought out and well organized and all the details, invitation to the presentation on a recording. They don't like it, not interested in it, in the first second they can just delete it. And to whatever extent they're interested in it, they can listen to it and follow up with listening to it over again because it's a recording. So I found it very unusual that it was so easy to be a telemarketer in the sense of being willing to leave a message and let that be enough. Now, maybe it wasn't enough in the attendance, but that's how I approached it. And I have talked to you about using the course from your phone or a tablet, right? Or a projection from there, a casting, they call that, to a monitor or a bigger screen. My phone, no phone. Oh, all right. So in taking a shot, I didn't understand what I meant in my own notes by what my shot meant, but by taking my shot and making a presentation, it made so many things obvious. One, I guess, that leaving a message isn't maybe the best way to get a response. Two, though, is that there was no text. In my course, it's all videos. It's an hour's worth of videos. But if I really want to use that course as an aid to presenting the information, I at least want to be able to read the words in the order that I want them read in, a script, right? Beyond just a video of the script. And then the things I took for entertainment, right, that you may or may not be interested in, but I took one of my shells, right, and not so much to see, but to actually feel what the curvature of the shell is like, feel the grip that shell is able to engage in, and from that grip, able to make rotation, and from that rotation, able to make movement. Seems like a long time ago I used to make the point about, see, this is a shell as well, right? And what's different about this shell versus the Nautilus shell I just had up? What about this shell? Where, okay, see, even this shell, see where it's not even, it's not symmetrical, right? But even though it's not symmetrical, it does have an axis around which it forms itself, right? And another favorite shell of mine from a favorite person of mine, there's this shell. Yeah, maybe put on black background. There's this shell. But again, see, it's not, I don't know if, I don't want to terminate my recording because if you're too close to the camera, it just cuts out. I've always tried to make this me talking and not relying on or allowing for the distraction of visual aids. So let me just try then in words say that some shells, most shells, in the way they grow, they don't grow symmetrical. And symmetrical definitely has its advantages when trying to move through space, whether you're a nautilus shell or you're a human being. And so, even though my presentation is just about CT and MMP, in terms of experientially being connected to the sea and to this curve, sets me up for pointing to core new tension by looking at the rotation at the hips and getting acknowledgement that the body has the capacity to engage its musculature in rotational dynamic. And unlike the nautilus shell, it's like, okay, how many axes of rotation does it have an ability to rotate around? Right? How many? Well, for me, my point of view, just one. And when you look at the human being, again, this is my trademark, the Michael Miller trademark, but it points to 6 of the primary axes in the body, looking at it from that point of view. The frontal plane that divides the body in half, front to back. Now, I said that all wrong. It's the sagittal plane that divides the body in two, because sagittal is a derivative of sword. And so in the use of the sword right down the middle, you divide the body in two. It's also called the median. And when you divide the body in two, you end up looking at the body from that view. And in that median sagittal view are the 6 axes that my trademark points to and identifies in the body, and hopefully shows the interaction between those rotational dynamics, between those rotational capacities. And so oppositional rotation between axes creates core new tension. And using the shell was a way of me to turn it into tactile. And then I took this big box that has in it this is in sepia, but those are different colors of pegs, and then remember, it's all about entertainment. I'm going to want people to walk away with an understanding of core new tension and Michael Miller Pilates. But I think the only hope for that is if they can look back upon it and immediately think that they had fun and wonder what was behind the fun, or what the fun was all about. So I had, for anybody that showed up, a bunch of pegs and a board that they fit into. And the puzzle, I guess I cast it as a puzzle in this case. The puzzle is to assemble the puzzle, the pegs, in the case, using all the pegs, put them in assemble the puzzle as though there's only one way to assemble it. There's a lot of different ways, right? I'll come back when I have them assembled to provide the answer to the question, or to how do you solve the puzzle for the answer that I'm looking for. You may have your own answers, but for me, there's this exercise of assembling all these colored pegs into these holes, and assuming that there is one answer to the puzzle. It's always interesting to see what people come up with, and then for me to explain the answer that I was looking for if they didn't already come up with it. And so then I had another puzzle in a bag, and depending upon how many people showed up, I would give each individual some of the pieces of the puzzle. And see, that immediately sets the stage regardless of whatever happens after that. In both instances, there is something to figure out, right? Core Nutension and Michael Miller-Pilates are something to figure out. Now, once you have them figured out, you can ignore them or make use of it however you wish. The point is that as a puzzle, there is something to figure out. And I think that's easily the case with CT and MMP, and the whole point of making the course on Udemy and then trying to implement it like I bought the course and was doing it, was enlightening about what the course needs, which is at least a whole slide presentation, so that you can't listen to video while you have a group of people in front of you. I know that all seems obvious, but I live in a cave, and it's been a long time since I've even worked on a PowerPoint presentation. So my action plan, in terms of the presenter and the course and trying to empower you to help others understand CT and MMP, is to add slides, to add text. And I couldn't get it on my phone, and I don't know if that's because, I don't know why that is. My phone thinks I'm a stranger, but my laptop knows me when it comes to the udemy.com website. So I have to figure that out too, so that ideally, from my phone, my smartphone, I have the ability to access the slides that we're talking about. And primarily there would be 5 slides, right? What are they? So there's 3 things from Joe. So I started talking about Michael Miller-Pilates first. 3 things from Joe. And so the first slide would be the definition of his method. The second slide would be his promise of what you get or how you get what you get when you do Pilates. And then the third slide would be the list of exercises. Those 3 things from Joe, because that's the 3 things that Michael Miller bases the Michael Miller Pilates view of Pilates on, right? And so then there's two left, and one would be core new tension, and the other would be the definition of Michael Miller-Pilates. And in the order that's on the course on Udemy, you taught core new tension first in order to take advantage of how core new tension is used in the pursuit of Michael Miller-Pilates, when you do Michael Miller-Pilates. And so the definition of core new tension is what? You know this. And the more you know, it's 4 words. 4 words. And maybe I could make them better. But maybe you could just memorize the 4 words and learn how to present and visually show what they mean. And more importantly, how it feels to get what? To get oppositional rotation between axes. And that's the slide on the definition of core new tension. And then the last one would be the definition of Michael Miller-Pilates, right? And that's uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. If I can do that into the camera, you can do that into the mirror until you can do it into the camera as well, because you know what the words are in the order that they go in. It's like if you really know Pilates, you know what the exercises are, and you know the order that they go in. And in that regard, it goes into the abstraction of being a language. My opinion, you know, some linguists would tell me I was crazy, but when you can then understand the sequence and the reason that it's in the order that it's in, it empowers you to choose what exercise is next relative to the context of the sequence Joe's mat, the choreography of Joe's mat, makes all by itself. Being a presenter, yes. And all I did was rent the meeting room breakfast area of the motel that I'm used to staying at. Very low key, and would have been easy to later have a mat class. And it could have easily held more people than would have ever been interested in the subject in the geographical area that I was in. Right? And it wasn't, so the point I'm making there is, as a presenter, you don't need to present in a Pilates studio or a gym or a salon or whatever, right? To present CT and MMP, all you really need is to show up and understand it well enough to try to explain it in words. And to the extent that the Pilates instructor comes out in you, and teacher, you usually have stuff that helps you communicate the words if you're engaging someone intellectually. I'm not sure how that came out. A Pilates instructor works at combining a human being's capability in being, thinking, and observing. And I think one of the things I've learned is that in engaging someone's thinking, there has to be something there substantial to think about. and to the extent that the thinking has some kind of sensational connection or reflection or resonance to it, it really deepens the impact that the thinking makes, hopefully. So, a shell and two puzzles. I was ready to be entertaining. Well, and I had my whole suitcase of teaching toys and tools that I had gone through again to filter out what I knew I didn't want there and to renew what I had at my disposal to help me present CT and MMP. And hopefully that sets an example to you that you ought to have your toy bag and all of the things that you use. Oh, and okay, I don't have any of that here, but I can demonstrate it this way. Okay, when it comes to introducing core new tension, right, and if you build the imagery first or make a common bond with your audience about the core, I believe that the core is in the middle of the body, and you have to stabilize the core, because Joe writes about coming from the core and moving out from there. So, in agreement on perhaps the core is important because, and so often I make the distinction that people describe the core as a location. MMP describes the core as a condition. And so the condition is not a squeeze, but a grip. The muscularity at the pelvis engages itself into a grip in order to move in a rotating fashion at the hips. So the core is a grip at the hips. You've heard me say this many times. It's like, for me, it's just so obvious and a fact. Get over it, get past it, and go and see where that takes you. And yet, see, all right, that's later in my... Number 4 is talk to the hands, so we'll get to that. So I encourage you to go by still. Because why? Because it's my best effort to date of core new tension and Michael Miller Pilates and how to present that information to someone. And those are the two things that, as a human being and in the pursuit of joy, I identified 2 things, in my opinion. I identified core new tension, which is a biomechanical fact in the way the body engages itself to accomplish the physics required to move in space, to survive, and to dance. Number two. I think I left off making a comment about MMP. MMP is an ideal view of Pilates. And Pilates is the 10,000. You give a name, and every human being has their view of it. So the name thing has 10,000 views that are all subjective. The key question comes in, though. I should write that one down. Just because all the views are subjective is what the views are of subjective as well. And from my point of view, if you're talking about an ideal, all of our subjective views of the ideal are that, subjective. But the ideal itself, now maybe a philosopher would say it's all depending upon the interpretation of the ideal, and in that interpretation it makes it subjective. But anything that at least allows one to approximate or causes one to be influenced as a Pilates instructor by an awareness of a point of view that considers the possibility or the theory of there being an ideal within the work, it takes the work to a whole new place. And you don't even have to say level, just somewhere else. And by new place is somewhere beyond where we are now, right? So let's go to number 2, which is really a more interesting talk. And I don't want to talk forever, talk it out, because I'm headed to Facebook after this. That was an advertisement to become a Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliate. That only takes money. Of course, to be an instructor and to know something helps. To be a certified instructor, you got to know this stuff. And by this stuff, what do I mean? CT and MMP, because you can get the rest of Pilates anywhere, but getting an understanding of an ideal point of view of Pilates only exists one place. And so it's 1 out of 10,000 views. Core new tension to me is my pride and joy because it distinctly is something that came out of my pursuit of Pilates that went beyond what exists in Pilates really to something applicable to, see, I don't mean the biomechanics of core new tension are universal whether you're involved with Pilates or not. That's why in my intro I talk about the core new core, and hopefully that addresses people that could care a whit about Pilates, but recognize the profound impact of recognizing core new tension in the body. Number two. Seems like I'm not getting anywhere. All right, number 2 is about breathing. And breathing is coming off of my observing a video clip of a very good Pilates instructor cueing breathing in a particular way at a particular time in the effort, and it may be one to say, yeah, but, and yeah, I know there's no yo quiero que valga, but to me, I want to point out to you about breathing many things. This particular student was in a curved support of inflection to allow the body to find itself and connect itself in key ways that are important for a student to find. And so, again, so whatever, so you put the body in a cradle of support, both in the furniture that you use and whatever attachments or connections you make with springs or bands, or ropes, or so the point is you put the body in a place where the body can assume the kind of control you want for the ability that it has within it. And this is a running theme I have with someone else, talking about you teach to the body that's in front of you. Yes? And that takes me to basketball belly. Let's see, okay. So basketball belly is an incident I had, a session I had with a client, never met before, wouldn't probably ever meet again, in a big house, but not that big, because he had his reformer set up in his formal living room. And he got on his reformer that he'd been on before, and I pretty much am hand-waving him and just saying, do what you're familiar with. And he lies down, and I'm cueing words that say, inhale, push out, exhale, come home. So we're talking about breathing, right? And that the movement that I saw was different. So the first few repetitions were of one way, and then a repetition happened that was much better than the previous ones, right? And so in the observing, you recognize distinction and differentiation, and the thing was, the way that was the distinction was much better control. And see, the thing is, this gentleman had a basketball belly, meaning that he just had a really pronounced dome-shaped belly, low, really, in his belly. And the instruction that I was giving him on inhale, press out, the air had nowhere to go, because, of course, he was tight in his rib cage, and his belly was pronounced and dome-shaped, and the musculature that I was hoping for or expecting from my cueing wasn't there. And when he exhaled to push out, the control was so much more apparent. It was like, do that again. See? So this is ripe with instructor reflection. If I had just waved my hand and said, get on, as get on, and if I had just waved my hand as though go in and out, I'd have probably seen the way that he was used to doing it, and that would be the way that he had the most control in doing it, or he wouldn't show that, right? And so it would have been more apparent to me right off the bat if I hadn't been stumbling along in my own assumptions about cueing and breathing. And so that story about the basketball belly feeds into the breathing being that was cued to exhale as you go away from center. And that set up the ping pong ball about breathing and when you breathe and how you breathe and why you breathe a particular way. So with a client that you've got in a curved support chair, and you're hoping to connect that, you're hoping to help them engage, for the most part, I'm thinking of helping them engage their core. And by engage their core, we can just be talking about using muscles that someday will coordinate into the symphony of a grip. My point about cueing that seemed more inclusive to how it happens all the time is the point of knowing what your target is for your student. And of course it's control, because that's what Joe named his work, his method. And in aiming for control and choosing how you breathe for what control you get for when. In the beginning, see, in some ways, in teaching a person to breathe, it's in stages where they don't have it connected at all, to where they're connecting it intentionally, to where it goes back to no connection at all, but the instinctual connection has been developed, rather than the state of innocence where you weren't aware of how it mattered. Breathing on a big stage in a big group. You know, I say, let me demonstrate something. Okay, I'm a dancer, and I'm going to dance across the stage. And as I leap up into the crowd, I intend to exhale to make my jump higher and better and longer. And I do that, and I ha the exhale into the world. And then I do the very same jump on an inhale. And they obviously, I think, visually speak for themselves. And what they say, in case you wouldn't know or don't have the opportunity to judge for yourself, is that it's like a dead balloon on an exhale trying to lift off in space, versus an inhale that's a filling balloon that has lift to it. So I wanted to add an addendum to what I thought was being presented as you exhale into your effort. Well, yes, at some stages of development for a student, that's very true. And a lot of that is about even going on the journey to find and establish the core at your hips, the grip at the hips. But there are larger fish to fry once you establish your core, that the inhale, moving away from center, facilitates. Just unlike the exhale. So know that there's moving away from center, right? That's eccentric. That's one of the reasons why that word is part of the definition in the ideal. There's moving away from center. And then there's moving towards center. And if you have no center to begin with, then exhalation towards center helps you engage musculature that you're looking to engage. But in finding the engagement you're after, your breath can be used in a more efficient manner. Because on the inhale, you pursue or you get more uniform engagement of the body, and all of the musculature that you use to inhale is part of the dynamic in core nu tension that facilitates the uniform engagement of the musculature that you're after. So, in karate, when you do a sequence of movements, that's called a kata, and it's like practicing in a fight in all directions. And it's usually two keynote movements within the kata. There are kiais, which are large exclamations of movement combined with breath, and the breath is an exhale. And having had a background in martial arts, I came into Pilates with the presumption that you are strongest in your exhale. And yet came to realize that in the breath that is circular, exhale, the exhalation, to whatever degree it might be stronger, it is concentric. And it's an exhaustion of life and breath. Or it's an exhaustion of breath and metaphorically of life. It is life taking rather than life giving. And it is on the inhale that the strength of life manifests itself. And shows the and the resultant uniform engagement from the inhalation itself. The inspiration is the fundamental movement that everything else follows from. And so that gives birth to, or me thinking of sharing with you, right, the waiting for the bus. When it comes to when do you inhale, you wait for the inhale bus. I knew I was missing a word. The inhale bus. You wait there on the curb at the inhale bus. What are you doing while you're waiting for the inhale bus? I think you're still exhaling, and if there is no more energy left in the exhale, you are still in the effort, the ideal expression of the movement. We're talking Pilates exercise. You're trying to ideally express that movement in the direction that you're moving in. So it's not static, it's dynamically in an effort of exhale. And that dynamic of the exhale where the air is still, or is already gone, but there you are, still in the effort. There you are, air gone, but still in the effort, waiting for the inhale bus. Now, see, this is Michael Miller Pilates, mainstream in terms of, I don't know anybody else that teaches this technique, I think. And maybe it's horrible or whatever, but it certainly is sensational. You know, you can feel it because you're waiting. You're intentionally triggering an instinctual inspiration. You're going in one direction, and not allowing the inhale to occur casually. You're waiting for the body itself to tune into the fact that it needs air, and that need becomes apparent to you, and that you then release to that need to breathe in as the initiation to your movement. Now, that's as organic as it gets. Inhale, bus, breathing. So breathing is such a big subject. And if Joe Pilates was a survivor and his method is about survival training, then being aware of your breath to knowing how to exhaust an effort to the point where something beyond your mind decides to start inhaling, but your body calls for it. You're merely standing in the way of your inhale to the point of being focused in your effort as to how you allow that inhale to transpire. It's another good word, transpire, inspire, transpire. So, okay, breathing. So alignment. So there, what is that? That's number 3. Alignment. I'm having a fantastic conversation with someone about a very different subject than Pilates, but who's interested, and so I said, can you see the line that my arms are making? You know, the other arm here is stretched out long, so my arms are out long to the sides. And I go, yeah. Okay. And you see that, like if I twist in this way, I'm rotating along the axis or that line. I go, yeah. This person is very smart. And the same thing I did with the ears, yeah. And then I showed them palms down, chin up, and then when I rotate my palms up, curl around my ears and look straight ahead, right? Pulling the ears back to line up over the shoulder creates a tension from the back of the neck to the front of the sternum, right? The front of the sternum. And it was all demonstration, and I wasn't even trying to lead into cueing or having them do it. I just was trying to get sort of slide past his explanation and come back to why we were in the meeting about data science. And the person that I had seen in one light was in such a posture, such a core new tension posture, right? It made me want to talk about alignment and about human nature. So number 3 is alignment. Is that sensational too? Not sensational, subjective. See, of these 10,000 things that we're talking about, and everybody has a view of Pilates, and so does really Pilates have any essence of its own? That's really the question. And I step forward and say, well, from an ideal point of view, I can make sense of it this way. Literally make sense of it. Not only have it make sense in a thinking capacity, but also make sensation that gives a connection of the theory to reality. And so, to me, that points again to reality. I may be completely wrong, but something's in there that everybody gets off on. And I think and if it were only the trip of teaching it, it would not be the phenomenon that it is. So there's a grassroots demand for more of whatever it is. And so to me, the more you understand what it is that they're after, the more likelihood you have to survive as a Pilates instructor. And so alignment isn't subjective. You can say, well, yeah, straight is straight or straight isn't straight. You know, you can dismiss all logic and dismiss all credibility of reproducible results within our experience of reality. But science to me, is reproducible results. Meaning, if you go out and do an experiment, you're going to get the same results, no matter what point of view you have. And in that regard, so here I am talking to someone that has a vast experience in a field that I expose myself to in fascination. And yet in talking about in my studies of Pilates and in wanting to understand the complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit, and coming to spirit as the capacity in the human being of observing, like the human can be thinking and the human can be being. It's those three capacities. And in explaining my interpretation of spirit to someone that's a physicist, I think it allowed me to give that person a view into Pilates that had more of a quantum reality connection to it than he would have ever imagined. And in doing so, I made reference to Bell's theorem, B-E-L-L, Bell's theorem. And this is something that's in his world, but not something he was immediately aware of. And so there I am talking to this guy who's a big-time scientist about the little bit that I know about observing and quantum reality, and that Bell's theorem points to, in technical words, is non-local and superluminal, but to me means connected to the universe faster than light. So it was a rush to be able to share with someone a point of view of Pilates that they could sink their teeth into on an intellectual level. So in that regard, talking to someone whose life is about science and physics and research, there's credibility that alignment is not something just subjective. And then having him go after this gesticulation in his own body and seeing him in core tension from his ears to his shoulders, right? What do I mean by that? I just mean like sitting up straight. He was sitting up straight. You know, is that subjective or not? No, that's reality. And we engage our muscles to deal with reality. And it was so striking to me as a Pilates instructor to see a person so make such a dramatic difference in their posture, and in a way be completely unaware of how dramatic it was. Like getting poked by your aunt to sit up straight, and so you make an adjustment, even though he wasn't being prodded or poked, but the adjustment was an unknowing reaction to making a difference in your posture that you couldn't tell the difference in. I'm not getting anywhere trying to explain that. Maybe it'll come out downstream. Number 4. Talk to the aunt. And yet, Julia Michaels has "I love you" written in the palm of her hand, which I think is sort of interesting. She's a singer. Talk to the hand. Usually talk to the hand I think of as a rejection, or I don't want to hear it. Or talk to something, or don't talk to me about it, talk to the hand. Right? And I think this issue of posture is to what degree we come back at our interaction with the world and gravity and our body and our situation in life, our existence as a human being in a gravity field is one of trying to bear the burden of our own weight in space, of being biological, of being human, bearing that as best we can without having to acknowledge it at all. Dwelling on being mortal and gonna die is not a joyful encounter with the world, I don't think. And so to an extent, what I'm pointing to is that all of us want to talk about, all of us want to respond to much of what it means to be human by saying, talk to the hand, or I want to ignore that. I don't want to deal with that. Talk to the hand. And so having to sit up straight, that's where my nudge from the ant, having to sit up straight, right, is something we'd rather have the hand deal with and not us. Because it's much better to slouch and just be more at ease and not have to make the effort of posture. But see, that takes me back to alignment. Is it subjective, a thing too? It's like, is gravity a subjective thing too? Why are we doing Pilates? Well, because we know that conditioning improves our ability to deal with what comes next, whatever it is. Because we're working on our capacity as a human being to combine our capacities of being, thinking, and observing. So all of it, human nature in general, right? Talk to the hand. I don't really want to face it. I don't want to deal with, I'm going to die someday. I don't want to deal with, I've got to stand up straight. I don't want to deal with nobody gets out of here alive. And to that extent, to whatever extent I'm willing to ignore that, you suffer the consequences of not being prepared for the challenges that life throws at you. And those challenges are determining the difference between what? Alive and dead. Or in pain and out of pain is one step away from that. And usually Pilates is so efficient at its training for what the future, that conditioning gets drawn into rehabilitation. I went out and tried to walk the walk that I'm trying to provide materials for you to walk, which is presenting CT and MMP. Hopefully that will improve, and I'm glad that I'm here getting to make a recording so that someone that didn't make it to their presentation, well, if you're the one talking to the hand, then make sure you say what you have to say as well as you can say it in a way that when the hand comes down, it's available. The thing about breathing is uniform engagement. The thing about breathing is uniform development. The thing about breathing is uniformly engaging. It's easy to separate the lungs from the rest of the body, but it's not so easy to do it functionally. And when you want uniform engagement, the lungs are part of the engagement. And can be cued as an instructor to occur at different times in different movements. More specifically, inhaling or exhaling away from center or towards center. And for me, ultimately, Pilates is an eccentric effort. It moves out from center to the extent that the grip goes in, the expansion comes out from that. You know, the heel of the grip, the forearm of the grip. The deeper the grip, the more expansion there is. That's why when you take this grip and this grip, or this one and this one, but when you engage in core new tension, the grips cause an expansion of the stems of the spring, right? The stems of the grip. And that makes that's the decompression you get. The CNO Archway, the Pilates community is enjoying making of it what they want to make of it because they can, which is okay. I come into this when we talk about survival because the point is to help you survive by sharing the Michael Miller point of view of core new tension and Michael Miller Pilates. Or I could say CT and the ideal, you know, ideal Pilates. And ideal Pilates can only is only somehow a threat if you've already made it into something else. But if you're part of the tsunami of Pilates passion sweeping the globe, and you want and understand it better, and you're swimming upstream, as we all do to some extent. Frankly, I'm amazed that not more swim to this part of the stream, but all the more reason to make broadcasts. In closing, keep the ideal in mind as a point of reference, as a buoy, because if it has any idealness to it at all, it shouldn't change or fluctuate, but the more light you shine on it, the clearer I expect it to be. Now that's an expectation, but I understand that, and if you find something better than an ideal interpretation of Joe's original work, come get me. And in understanding that ideal, it can guide you to a deeper ability to utilize breathing in different ways at different times. In different ways. I said that. I meant ways in two different ways, really. But just inhaling, moving away from